Okay, namaste everyone, and thank you for joining in this class on Kala Sarpa. So we were, doing the 6-12 axis, okay, and we looked at Rahu in the 6th house, and today we'll be looking at Ketu in the 12th house, followed by a few example charts, okay. But before we begin, let's start with the daily Shanti mantra. Om Sahana Bhavatu, Sahana Bhunakatu, Sahaviryankara Vavahai. तेजस्विनादधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ओम शांति शांति शांति. All right. So Rahu in the 6th will ensure that Ketu gets placed in the 12th house, and we know that the 12th house rules the feet. Okay, it is also known as the Padasthana. Pada means feet. Okay, so Ketu is the planet of detachment. So the native may suffer from foot problems or, numbness, stiffness, then tingling, twitching, restless foot syndrome, and can even reach a stage where the foot has to be amputated. Okay, maybe, due to some accident or some defect of birth. Okay, and then even atrophy is possible. Okay, so I had a friend in college. Okay, and he had Ketu in the 12th house, and I just started doing Vedic astrology. I just started studying Vedic astrology at that point of time, and I did not know much about it. But then, when I saw her chart, it was Ketu in the 12th house, and just 3 months later, she was diagnosed with cancer that required her left foot to be amputated. Okay, so that is how Ketu can make you go through that. Okay, it's a traumatic experience nonetheless. Okay, but then if you look at the positive side, the native may enjoy rehabilitation through podiatric therapy. Okay, for example, foot baths or foot massage or reflexology, or even walking meditations that are very popular nowadays. Okay, now if Ketu is placed in a water sign, okay, or in an air sign, it may give sleeping troubles. All right. The 12th house also rules losses. That is the house of losses. So Ketu's ambivalence means that the native does not fear the natural ebb of things. Okay. What it means is these people will do charity without the fear of, diminishing money, without the fear of money getting diminished from their bank accounts. Okay. And these people, they find it pretty easy to declutter their homes because, they are not attached to things. Okay, so you can take it as a prediction. If your 12th house has some, has some benefic planets, then it is pretty much difficult to declutter. Okay, because then you'll be getting attached to the things related to those benefic planets. Okay, if your 12th house contains Saturn, then it will be difficult to declutter because you'll not be willing to, to throw away the old things. Okay, and because Ketu is detachment, so this native, he or she may immigrate far away, okay, from their original place of birth. Okay, and sometimes they may subject themselves to psychotherapy because they are not afraid of surrendering their ego. Okay, Rahu in the 6th, it reflects an obsessive physicality, while Ketu in the 12th, it offers an alternate reality, for example, out of body experiences. And I've seen some clients with Ketu in the 12th, they have an aptitude for remote viewing. Okay, so it's a phenomenon where the higher self leaves the body to explore a world beyond what the lower self can see. It is also very good for astral projection. Okay, now not everyone can do astral projection. There are not many teachers teaching astral projection, but if you can learn it from a genuine source, then it's really fantastic. It's really phenomenal. Okay, these people, they usually have low psychic boundaries, and as a result of that, they may be subjected to subliminal impressions. They're open to psychic influences, and if you are a hypnotist or if you're looking to practice hypnotism, you can actually 12th house, a native having 12th house Ketu can become a good subject for hypnotism. Okay, And since the second and the 12th house rules the eyes, okay, so clairvoyance may be the most likely form of channeling. Okay. The native may be ambivalent about your dreams and their interpretation, foreign travel as well as meditation and prayer. And they may be fond of taking retreats as a source of rest and rehabilitation. Okay. Now, retreats don't work for everyone. All right. I've seen people coming from retreats only to become more frustrated than they were when they went to the retreat. But yes, for some people, retreats can do wonders to the psychology. And for those having Ketu in the 12th house, retreats can be a wonderful way of getting in touch with yourself. Okay. And, these people may also disregard conventions of the bedroom. For example, revealing low barriers for sexual intimacy while remaining ambivalent. Okay. Now, Ketu is the planet of surrendering. Okay. And the 12th house, it rules the bedroom. So these natives can be a passive sex partner. Okay. Now, this placement can also indicate indiscriminate sex initiated by others. Okay. But it also suggests that those natives are susceptible to sexual fantasies because, their desires aren't strong enough to pursue the matter in real life. Okay. At heart, these natives, they may be very ambivalent about sex. All right. And Ketu is very restless, but, there is also a huge sense of detachment associated with Ketu. So it can reflect a lack of commitment to physical intimacy. Okay. Now, I don't mean to say that these people, they avoid sex altogether, but, they may have an attitude of, I'll take it or I'll leave it. Okay. So they are not attached to it. All right. And Ketu is naturally disposed to let go. Okay. So in the 12th house, it favors occupations that make this happen. For example, anesthesiologists, counselors. There are, death counselors in the West who help you to deal with death. Okay. And, administrators in weight loss clinics. Yes. Social workers in, working for drug rehabilitation victims. Okay. Executioners. Okay. The people who work as hangmen or, those who administer fatal injections to condemned criminals. All right. And then it can also produce priests who perform last rites of the dead. Okay. Now, Ketu is regarded as moksha karaka, and there is a big misconception that Ketu in the 12th can bring moksha, but this is nowhere mentioned in the BPHS. Okay. I think it has come from the concept of karaka bhavanashaya. Okay. That means when the karaka for something is in the house of that thing, it makes it doubly vulnerable to negative influences. Okay, but Karaka Bhavanashaya does not work that way. For Karaka Bhavanashaya to work, three conditions have to be satisfied. The house has to be afflicted. The Karaka of that house has to be afflicted. And the planet sitting in that house has to be afflicted. So all the three conditions have to be, simultaneously fulfilled for Karaka Bhavanashaya to fructify. Okay. But this is a misconception that Ketu in the 12th can bring moksha. It does not. Okay, moksha is a very different concept. You cannot die for moksha. You have to do something else. Okay. What happened here? Okay. So Ketu in the 12th, does not practice conventional prayer. Okay. You have heard about the supplicant petitions to God for favor in the mundane world. Give us this day our daily bread, or Hey Bhagwan, mujhe ye do, wo do. Okay. So these people, they are more inclined to meditative prayer. Okay. Offering surrender. Okay. Offering surrender. For example, you have heard that prayer. You've heard that prayer in school. Yes. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Okay. So that is the serenity prayer, and it perfectly, reflects, or it perfectly represents Ketu in the 12th house. And with respect to divine guidance, divination or meditation, these natives, they may be unable to choose an appropriate tradition, or, they may be unwilling to undertake the necessary development to cultivate a practice. Okay. Now, Ketu in the 12th can also make one a sadhu. Okay. So a sadhu is someone who has surrendered all attachments of the material world, and the sadhu one wanders without intention, giving up all desires for positive outcomes and accepting whatever God throws his way. Okay. Now it's very much possible that you become a sadhu without leaving your house. All right. But, you know, Ketu in the 12th can definitely give those tendencies. Okay. And it can also lead to feelings of homelessness. Okay. The native may feel like a homeless transient. Okay. Like someone who is living in a summer camp or youth hostel or a refugee camp or even a concentration camp. Okay. And on the flip side, these people, they actually might end up finding true sanctuaries in ashrams or spiritual retreats or even foreign residency. Okay, especially when associated with spiritual pilgrimage. You know, I've seen foreigners landing up in Kashi or Haridwar and never going back to their own country. So that is Ketu in the 12th. Okay, so a spiritual pilgrimage that, you know, that ended up being a, you know, that ended up where they ended up finding a home for themselves. All right. And because Ketu is very apathetic, these people, they may shun medical clinics, you know, hospitals or mental institutions that require surrender to custodians of one's care. Okay. And this happens because, you know, I've seen people with Ketu in the 12th house, they fear confinement. Okay. And they feel very afraid, or they feel very, you know, they feel very, let's say it is very unpleasant for them to be in a closed room. Okay. Even a prison cell, right? A prison cell is a closed room closed from all sides. So for these people, they find it very difficult. Okay. You can extend this concept to, you know, if someone has Ketu in the 12th house and if he is living in a landlocked country like Nepal or something, these people will have a tendency to escape from that country. Okay. Vairagya is different. Okay. Vairagya means you are not filled with raga or dvesha or klesha. You've surrendered, you know, you've surrendered your anger. Vairagya does not mean detachment. It has been wrongly interpreted as detachment. It means you've surrendered your anger. You no longer get angry. You have, you know, mastered your emotions. That is Vairagya. Okay. Now, the native would frequently, you know, the native at 12th house Ketu would frequently want to escape into a dream world because they feel very taxed by, you know, physical labor. But even in sleep, the mind may find no rest. As I said, you know, Ketu, if this Ketu goes into a water sign or an air sign, it makes it very difficult for you to fall asleep. Okay. And it can give wild dreams. Okay. It can give wild dreams. And some people with Ketu into 12, they suffer from nightmares, while others, they may experience vivid dreams, you know, eclipsing all other experiences. Okay. The native may also display, you know, a low threshold between dreaming and waking. Okay, you have seen those people walking in their sleep. Those would be having a prominent Ketu in the 12th house. All right, and if you are having bad dreams or if you are having vivid dreams, okay, that which you want to explore further, then the remedy would be to, you know, to engage in Tibetan dream yoga. Okay, where you can cultivate conscious influence in your dreams and it can bring a new awareness to waking life. Okay, Tibetan dream yoga is the solution. If you have, you know, a bad Ketu in the 12th that does not allow you to sleep or that gives you nightmares. Okay, so just give me a few seconds. Let's, you know, let's take a few example charts. Just let me check the database. Okay, so let's take a few example charts here. Okay, let me share the screen. Okay, so I hope you can see the application. Yeah. So this is Robert Blake. You know, he's a former American actor, and he starred in multiple TV serials and movies. Okay. And if you're a fan of American movies, you must have seen him in The Cold Blood and in the series Beretta. Okay. Robert Blake, he began his career as a child actor, but he had a terrible youth. Okay, because he was abused physically, emotionally, and sexually by a drunken and violent stepfather. Okay, and as a consequence, he suffered deep depression, and his early years were marked by alcohol, drugs, and fighting. Okay. Now he was expelled from school for 5 times. Just hold on. Okay, so he was expelled from school for 5 times, and then he was later on drafted into the army. But even there, he proved very rebellious and compulsively resistant to any authority. Okay, and he came into Hollywood as a stunt actor, but he became heavily involved in drinking, pill popping, as well as heroin addiction. And he was even accused of stealing cars and getting into motorcycle accidents. Okay. He got married and he had 2 kids from the wedlock, but after his TV series Beretta was cancelled, his entire life spiraled out of control. He went through a divorce and he came back into his old habits of substance abuse. Okay, and he had to take a long hiatus from Hollywood, where he had become persona non grata because of his temperamental and tyrannical behavior. He actually managed to make some comeback. Okay, but then when things were getting more stable, his second wife was shot to death in their car during a brief interval when Blake had returned to a restaurant to retrieve a handgun he had been carrying for her protection. Okay, although initially he was not regarded as a suspect, he was later arrested and charged with her murder. He was acquitted with a criminal suit, but later convicted in a civil suit filed by the children of his deceased wife. And he was ordered to pay around, a lot of money in damages. I don't remember. And since then, he has filed for bankruptcy due to, unpaid legal fees and taxes. Okay, now look at Blake's chart. The moon occupies the same sign as Ketu. That means the moon is badly eclipsed. Okay, but it lies within the degree of the nodal axis. So this is a partial Kala Sarpa. And because, as I said, the moon is highly eclipsed, it is a dosha. Okay, and this is an anuloma type where the planets are moving towards Rahu. So it's a very difficult Kala Sarpa. Okay, so Rahu is strong because it is in the Mula Trikona of Saturn. Okay, it is an Aquarius, and its dispositor Saturn is also strong, being retrograde and in its own sign. Okay, so this contributes to his acting abilities because Rahu is the great illusion master. But then, those illusions also carry negative consequences. Okay, Saturn and Mars, they aspect each other mutually, and he was known to be a ragaholic. Okay, and as trick lords, they are afflicting the second house. Okay, and its Lord Venus is also getting afflicted, which causes a lot of instability in his financial affairs. Okay, now at the time of Blake's birth, he was born in Venus Dasha and Moon Antardasha. So there is, by the virtue of this of this birth Dasha, there is an immediate link to Kala Sarpa. You look at Venus, which is in its own Rashi in the second house, but is impacted by Mars and Saturn. Okay, and because Venus is the lord of both the second and the ninth house, it creates a certain degree of misery and torture involving his family. And because it is also associated with the ninth house, so the torture also involves his father. Okay, and by extension, fatherly figures as well as other authorities. The moon is, the moon is a Krishna Paksha moon. It is in the 12th house with Ketu. And since moon is the Karaka for Manas, this eclipse of the moon, it creates a lot of emotional disturbance. Okay. Ketu's Rashi dispositor is the sun. Okay. So, but then look at the sun is in its own nakshatra, but it stands at, it is involved in a Papa Kartari yoga involving Mars and Ketu. Okay. So that typically threatens violence and injury. All right. And it is also associated with 2 benefics, Mercury and Jupiter. But they are, they are very close to each other. That means they are in Graha Yuddha. Okay. Now there are these 3 planets, Sun, Moon, Sun, Mercury, and Jupiter. They all occupy Uttara Phalguni. Okay. It's a sun ruled nakshatra. So what is happening is, all these planets in each of their dashas or antardashas, they are getting involved in that Papa Kartari yoga because sun is getting involved in that. All right, so they are behaving like the sun, and since the sun also represents ego and it occupies the the lagna, at the same time it rules the 12th house. Okay, sun is ruling the 12th house. Okay, which also stands for some kind of self-destructive behavior, right? Now, his chart does contain a few notable yogas. Okay, for example, there is Bhadra Yoga, there is Buddhaditya Yoga, and Saraswati Yoga involving all the three benefics. Okay, now Kala Sarpa, we know it has the potential to magnify the effects of any exaggerated planets, of which Blake has 3 exaggerated planets. Okay, the Krishna Paksha moon, Jupiter, which is almost combustion, and retrograde Saturn. Okay, so this combustion of Jupiter, it provoked a lot of marital problems for Blake, and many of the key events in Blake's life occurred in the periods of the nodes. Okay, planets linked to the nodes and planets in exaggerated condition. As I said, he was born into Venus Dasha, and this Dasha ran from his birth till the age of 15. So he had already passed 5 years of Venus Dasha before his birth. Okay, so just a minute. Saraswati Yoga, that's easy, Twinkle Ji. That's easy. Venus in its own nakshatra, Sun and Jupiter and Mercury in the first house. So the Lagna, Mercury in its own nakshatra, in its own sign, Venus in its own sign, and then there is this Jupiter joining this Mercury. Okay, so the benefics forming a yoga in the first and the second house. It can also happen in the 9th and the 10th house. This is a version of Saraswati Yoga which was shared by, I thought this was shared by Mantresha in his book Prashna Marga. Okay, you can look that up, Saraswati Yoga by Mantresha, you'll get it. Okay, 2 benefics in their own sign, and then joined by another benefic in one of those signs that contributes Saraswati Yoga, that forms Saraswati Yoga. Okay, yeah, he was, but then he got into it. He then got into a lot of addictions. Okay, so as I said, Venus Dasha, it ran from it was already past 5 years from his birth, so he ran it till the age of 15. And in Jupiter under Dasha, at the age of 6, he began his career as a child actor, and he continued working for the rest of the Dasha. Okay, the Sun Dasha, which ran from the age 15 to 21, is difficult. In Sun Rahu, he was drafted into the army, and he would frequently wound up the stockade for insubordination. Okay, Moon Dasha, of course, it was going to be difficult because Moon is eclipsed, and it ran from the age 21 to 31. And during Moon Rahu, when Blake was 23, his father committed suicide. Okay, during Mars Dasha, from the age 31 to 38, he enjoyed full employment as an actor. And during Mars Saturn, at the age of 33, he drew a lot of attention for his key role in the movie In Cold Blood. And because Rahu has such a strong dispositor, okay, Saturn is retrograde here, so it provided a very meteoric rise in life. Okay, and from the age of 38 to 56, he was busy as an actor. And during Rahu, Jupiter, and Rahu Saturn, at the age of between the age of 41 to 46, he had a successful run with his show Beretta. Okay, it ran 3 seasons, during which he also won an Emmy Award. Okay, during Rahu Venus, at the age of 50, he divorced his first wife. Now Jupiter is combust, and as a result of which the Dasha brought problems. Okay, so from the age of 56 onwards, his TV employment was on and off. Okay, in Jupiter Moon, at the age of 67, he married again, but then less than 6 months later, his his second wife was allegedly shot dead by him in highly suspicious circumstances. Okay, at the age of 68, during Jupiter Mahadasha Mars Antardasha, he was arrested and charged with his wife's murder. And during Jupiter Rahu, at the age of 71, he went on trial, for murder, but he was acquitted, as I said. So Saturn Dasha, from the age of 72, his life began to unravel. And look at Saturn's nakshatra lord, it is the moon. Okay, it is the moon. The moon is the Krishna Paksha moon, and it is afflicted by Ketu in the 12th house. So in Saturn, at the age of 72, he faced a civil lawsuit from his, from the children of his second wife. And he was tried and convicted for her wrongful death. And he was, he was ordered to pay $15 million in damages. Okay, and within 3 months, he declared himself as bankrupt. Okay, so it's a very tumultuous life that he had, or that he is having. Okay, Alfred Hitchcock, I hope everyone knows about him. Okay, and he was an English film director and producer, and Forbes calls him the most influential filmmaker in the history of cinema. Okay, he had a 6-decade career, long career, and during which he directed 53 feature films, and he became well known as all of his actors, okay, because of his many interviews. And he also did a lot of cameo roles in his films, and he also hosted a very famous TV series titled Alfred Hitchcock Presents. Okay, so he also suffered a tumultuous childhood because at the request of his own father, he was briefly jailed at the age of 5. Okay, and that experience installed a lifelong fear in him of the police. Okay, as a youth, Hitchcock was schooled by the Jesuits, okay, whom he credits for his skills in the organization, control, and analysis. And it was a combination of his personality that he later on applied in a strict adherence to creating storyboards for plot structure prior to shooting a film. Okay, he had a very large appetite, which was difficult to suppress, and as a result, he struggled with obesity, and he hovered around 300 pounds for much of his life. Okay, he was married for 53 years, okay, to a woman. His wife also had Kala Sarpa, okay, but he suffered from unfulfilled sexual desire that resulted in obsession with many and sexual harassment of some of his actors. Okay, he began his career in England, but he was soon lured into Hollywood, and he spent the rest of his life in California. Okay, some of his films were blockbusters, for example, Psycho. Okay, and most of his films, they offer psychologists a lot of material for interpretation. Okay, voyeuristic points of view from cameras, cameo roles in every film, a fascination with emotionally cold blondes, difficult relations with mother figures, and sexual innuendo. So it seemed that he was living his life in his movies. Okay, and he was nominated 5 times for Best Director at the Academy Awards, but he never won an Oscar. Okay, but then he was made a Knight of the British Empire just months before his death of renal failure in 1980. So he's known as Sir Alfred Hitchcock. Okay, look at the chart here. It's a very powerful chart. Okay, so no planet occupies the same sign as either of the nodes, and the intervening signs are occupied. So this is a rare perfect Kala Sarpa. Okay, it is an Anuloma type with all the planets moving towards Rahu. So it's a difficult Kala Sarpa. Okay, so Mars is aspecting Rahu, that creates Kuja dosha, but Jupiter is aspecting Ketu, that's a yoga. Okay, so it's a mix of both yoga and dosha. And Hitchcock was born into Rahu Dasha, Saturn Antar Dasha, and as a result of his natal, by the virtue of his natal Dasha Lord, there is an intimate link with Kala Sarpa. Okay, Rahu in the 6th is aspected only by Mars. Okay, which is also the Yoga Karaka for Cancer Lagna. Okay, so this Yoga Karaka, it conferred him creativity as well as a high degree of command and control over his field. Okay, Mars is a Kshatriya Graha, so it did provide him with that high degree of command and control. Okay, Saturn is retrograde in the 5th, but it forms no yoga. Okay, there is no worst form of Kala Sarpa Bikong. Okay, the only thing is the easier part and the difficult part. If it is Anuloma, that means all the planets are moving towards Rahu. It is difficult if it is Viloma, where all the planets are moving towards Ketu. It's easy. Okay, I have a Viloma Kala Sarpa. All right, so that's how it is. This is Anuloma. This is Anuloma. Okay, this is Anuloma, not Viloma, because Rahu and Ketu move in the other direction. No? Okay. So Rahu's sign dispositor is Jupiter in the 4th house. Okay, and this Jupiter, it participates in a Kesari and Raja Yoga with the moon. Okay, and it also integrates Parivartana Yoga between the moon and Venus. Okay, and this combination invoked his artistry, indulgence in food and drink, and he had a formidable mother complex. Okay, what some of his critics have suggested. All right, if you have watched his films, you will understand what I'm speaking. Okay, the mother occupies a central figure in almost all of his films. All right, and Ketu's sign dispositor is Mercury, which is retrograde in the 2nd house and is getting aspected by Saturn. So Kala Sarpa is amplifying his exaggerated planets. Both Saturn and Mercury are retrograde, and they have a sambandha or relation between them. Okay, you see Mercury receiving Saturn's aspect and Saturn being in Mercury's nakshatra. Okay, and although both of these are considered eunuch planets, in this chart they are associated with sex because Saturn is the lord of the 7th and 8th, while Mercury is the 12th lord. Okay, so but because these are eunuch planets, okay, it suggests some kind of voyeurism. Okay, a theme that has found traction by many of, that has been given traction in many of his movies. For example, if you have watched Psycho or The Rear Window, okay, so it explains a lot about his lifelong fascination with cold blondes. Okay, just watch those movies and you will have a much deeper understanding of human psychology as compared to what a real life course will teach you. Okay, now all the 3 planets, Sun, Venus, and Nakshatra, Sun, Venus, and Saturn, they occupy Mercury nakshatras. Okay, so what will happen is for all those bhuktis, these planets will also start giving the effects of Mercury. Okay, and given its association in this horoscope with intellect, writing and repressed sexuality, these light themes became even more pronounced due to the perfect Kala Sarpa. Okay, and many of the salient events in Hitchcock's life occurred in periods of the nodes. Okay, planets linked to the nodes or planets in exaggerated condition. Jupiter Dasha ran from the age 12 to 28, and in Jupiter Saturn at the age of 15 his father died. Okay, in Jupiter Rahu at the age of 27 he married a woman who was exactly the same age as him, and born just a few hours later. Okay, his wife was born just a few hours later, so she also had a Kala Sarpa in the horoscope. Okay, at the age of Saturn Dasha, at the age of 27 to 47 during Saturn Dasha, Hitchcock's film career took off and he relocated from England to Hollywood. And during his first Saturn return, okay, his only daughter was born. And in Saturn Moon at the age of 39, he signed a very expensive 7-year contract with Hollywood. Okay, in Saturn Rahu, between 1940 and 1942, he bought 2 properties in California. Okay, and California at that point was more expensive than Manhattan now. Okay, his prolific rise came during Mercury Dasha at the age of 47 to 64. And during this period, he produced some of his best known films. Okay, for example, Strangers on a Train, Dial M for Murder, Vertigo, Psycho, and so on. And in Mercury Rahu at the age of 56, his TV series called Alfred Hitchcock Presents was launched. Okay, so during Mercury Saturn Dasha at the age of 62, he initiated a 10-day extensive interview with Francois Truffaut, where he answered a mind-boggling 500 questions. Okay, but then during that same period, he was accused of sexual harassment by Tippi Hedren on the sets of The Birds. Okay, Ketu Dasha, it ran from the age of 64 to 71, and during this period he released Birds and Marnie. Okay, and his critics described the film as a story of sexual violence, a sick film, because I think Hitchcock suffered all his life from furious sexual desire and its lack of gratification. Okay, Venus Dasha from the age of 71 till his death in 1980, it just kept hitting his health, and it resulted in in diminished production, limited to the movies Frenzy and Family Plot. And during Venus Rahu at the age of 80, he was knighted by the Queen. And 3 months later, in Venus Jupiter, he was dead. Okay, so that's it. Okay, these are the two charts that I wanted to look at, having Rahu in the 6th and Ketu in the 12th. And in the next class, we'll be looking at Rahu in the 7th and Ketu in Lagna. Okay, so do you have any questions for today? Okay, no questions, it seems. Anyways, so thank you so much for joining in. Tomorrow there is the orientation of Satyam Shivam Sundaram. The recordings will does it accentuate only the negatives or the positives also? No, it accentuates both, not only the negatives, also the positives. Okay, so Satyam Shivam Sundaram starts at 8 o'clock, and after it'll take a half an hour for the orientation to happen, and after that we will have the regular class on Vedic astrology. Okay, so thank you so much for joining in. I'll see you in the next class. Namaste. Om Gurave Namaha.